Hi everyone. We're going to talk about volume of cylinders today. So this is something that we did do in 7th grade last year. It was one of the three-dimensional shapes we learned how to find the surface area of and the volume of. But we're going to do a little bit more with it this year. So if you remember, a cylinder is a three-dimensional shape that has bases that are circles, and then around the sides of it, you can think of that as a rectangle. Our formula that we use for volume of cylinders is pi times the radius squared times the height. Now, I believe you guys have a picture on your notes right here of a cylinder. So I'm just going to redraw that in quickly. So just to remind you, the radius is halfway through the circle, the top or the bottom of your cylinder. Your height is how tall your cylinder is, and depending on what the directions say will depend on what we plug in for pi. So you can see here, if the directions say to round, that's when we use the pi key on the calculator. To leave your answer in terms of pi, if the directions say to do that, we basically don't do anything with the pi. We just leave it alone. We treat it like it's a variable. And then if the directions say to use 3.14, then we'll substitute 3.14 for pi in our work. Okay, so let's do some practice. So number 1 says to find the volume of the cylinder and to use 3.14 for pi. So the first thing we're going to do, just as we always do, is write down our formula. And then our second step will be our substitution step. So because the directions said to use 3.14 for pi, I'm going to substitute that in. The radius of this cylinder is 5, so I'm going to have 5 squared. And the height of this cylinder is 8.3. So in your calculator, we're going to type in 3.14 times 5 squared times 8.3. Remember, for 5 squared, you would type in 5 and then the x squared key, or you could just do 5 times 5, it doesn't matter. And we should be getting 651.55, and this is centimeters cubed. So remember, with volume, our units are always cubed. Okay, number 2. Find the volume of a cylinder with a diameter of 16 inches and a height of 20 inches. Leave your answer in terms of pi. Okay, so again, let's start with our formula. And by the way, you guys will be given these formulas for volume. I don't think I said that in the last lesson. You do not have to have these memorized. For the final exam, for any state test that you have, they will be provided for you. Okay, so what do they tell us here? We know the diameter is 16, we know the height is 20, and we are leaving our answer in terms of pi. So what that means is in our work, we're going to just keep pi as pi. Now for the radius, remember the radius is half of the diameter. So if we know our diameter is 16 inches, our radius is half of that, which is 8. So 8 squared. And then they tell me that my height is 20. Okay, so when we go to type this in our calculator, remember, because it's in terms of pi, we are not typing anything in for pi. So the only thing you're putting in your calculator is 8 squared times 20. And when you do that, so 64 times 20 is 1,280. And again, because it's in terms of pi, we're going to put the pi on the end. Okay, so pi in this case is it's like a variable. Okay, so typically when we use variables, we put the number first, that's considered your coefficient, and the variable at the end, so that's exactly how we're going to write it here. We still need a label. This is in inches cubed. All right, number 3. A metal paperweight is in the shape of a cylinder. The paperweight has a height of 1.5 inches. I'm going to underline that. And a diameter of 2 inches. How much does the paperweight weigh if 1 cubic inch weighs 1.8 ounces? Round your answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, so what this means is that we have to first figure out the volume in cubic inches, and then we'll convert that into ounces. Okay, so let's start with our formula. Now, because the directions say to round our answer, that means that we should be using the pi key on our calculator. So when you show your work, we're going to leave pi as pi. Let's see, we know our diameter is 2 inches, so our radius would be half of that, so times 1 squared, and our height is 1.5. So when you type this in, you're going to type in pi key times 1 squared, which is really just 1, times 1.5. And you should be getting a very long decimal. Okay, something that just keeps going. And this would be inches cubed. Okay, so we're not done because we know the volume in cubic inches, but they're asking us how many ounces this would be. So if we look here, here's our conversion. Every cubic inch is 1.8 ounces. So if you think about it, if I have about 4.7 cubic inches, I would multiply that number by 1.8, and that would tell me how many ounces I get. Okay, so we're going to take our number. Now it says to the nearest tenth. And so when you multiply this out, I'm going to get 8.46. So to the nearest tenth, that's 8.5 ounces. Okay. Number 4, how much cake batter can 2 round pans hold? Round your answer to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so in the picture, they're showing us 1 round cake pan, and we have to figure out how much cake batter for 2. So we'll figure out the volume of that one, and then we can just multiply it by 2. So start with your formula. Again, the directions are saying to round, which means we're using our pi key. So I'm going to leave pi in my substitution step. In the picture, we can see that 8 inches is the diameter. It goes the whole way across. So our radius would be half of that. So we're going to do times 4 squared, and then our height is 2. All right, so if we type that in, pi key times 4 squared times 2, we should be getting a long decimal, that many cubic inches. Now again, they're saying for 2 pie pans, or cake pans, so we're going to want to multiply that answer times 2, and they say to round to the nearest hundredth, so that's 201.06 cubic inches. All right, so there you go. You can make a double layer cake today. That would give you something to do. All right, turn the page. Number 5, Jana is making homemade candles. She has 2 candle molds, a prism and a cylinder. Which mold uses the least amount of wax? Use 3.14 for pi. Okay, so when they reference this prism, if you look at the picture, it's a rectangular prism, and so that was what we did in our last lesson. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with that one, and remember the formula for that is volume equals length times width times height. And if you remember, it really doesn't matter which numbers you choose as the length, width, and height because of the commutative property. We're just multiplying them all together anyways. And so 5 times 5 times 8 would give me 200, and this is inches, so inches cubed. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the cylinder mold. So volume equals pi r squared h, and I am being asked to use 3.14 for pi. So in my substitution step, I have 3.14 times, if you look at the picture, the radius is 3. So times 3 squared, and my height is 8. Okay, so when you're typing this in, remember you're not using the pi key, you're actually using 3.14. So go ahead and type that into your calculator, and you should be getting 226.08 inches cubed. So which mold uses the least amount of wax? That would be the rectangular prism. All right, great. Number 6. A punch bowl is in the shape of a cylinder. The height of the punch bowl is 10 inches and the diameter of the punch bowl is 14 inches. What is the volume of the punch you need to fill the punch bowl 1 inch from the top? Round your answer to the nearest whole number. Okay, so we have this punch bowl. I'm just going to do a quick picture here. Don't mind my awesome drawings. That one is really bad, sorry. So the height of the punch bowl is 10 inches. The diameter is 14. So the diameter goes all the way across through the middle. And they asked, what is the volume of the punch bowl you need to fill it 1 inch from the top? Okay, so that makes sense that we wouldn't be filling the punch bowl all the way to the top because you move it, it spills, you put a ladle in, it spills. So basically what that means is that our height is really not 10 because 10 would be filling it to the top. So when we're using our formula, we're going to be substituting in 9 for the height for that reason. Okay, so pi r squared h. They're telling me to round, which means we're using our pi key. So in your substitution step, we're leaving pi alone. We know the diameter of the punch bowl is 14 inches, so the radius would be half of that. So times 7 squared. And then we said we're going to use 9 for our height because we're not filling it to the top. We're filling it 1 inch from the top. All right, so in our calculator, we are doing pi key times 7 squared times 9, and we are rounding to the nearest whole number. So 1,385 inches cubed. Okay, number 7. Tom is making strawberry jelly and is going to put it into the jar shown. About how much jelly will he need to fill the jar to 0.5 of an inch from the top? Round your answer to the nearest whole number. Okay, so very similar problem. Here we have the picture. We can see that the jar is 5 inches tall, and if we need to fill it so it's a half of an inch from the top, what that means is that our new height is going to be 4.5, okay, because I need a half of an inch left empty. All right, so here we go. Pi r squared h. We are being asked to round again, which means we're using our pi key, putting pi in for our work. We are told that the radius is 2 inches from the diagram. We can see that's halfway across, so times 2 squared. And again, we're using 4.5 for the height because we need to leave a half of an inch at the top. We don't want to fill it all the way. All right, so we're typing in pi key times 2 squared times 4.5, and we are rounding again to the nearest whole number. And so that comes out to be 53 cubic inches. Okay, last question. A barrel in the shape of a cylinder is cut in half lengthwise to make a water trough for horses. Does the expression pi times 1/2 r squared h represent the volume of water that the trough holds? Explain. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a cylinder that has been cut in half. So typically, if you think about how we would do this in any situation, we would probably find the volume of the whole cylinder and then take that volume and divide it by 2. So the formula that they're giving us, if you look closely, what they're doing is they're taking half of the radius, which really is not the same as dividing the entire volume by 2. Okay, so this expression is not going to work to find the volume of that trough. Okay, so I'm going to say no we would need to divide the entire volume by 2. Not just the radius. Okay. So then part B says the barrel is 5 feet long and the radius of its base is 1.5 feet. How much water will the trough hold? Use 3.14 for pi. Okay, so now we've pretty much described what we need to do to actually figure this out. So I'm going to take my normal volume formula for a cylinder, but I'm going to divide it by 2 in the end because it's only half of a cylinder. Okay, so they are telling me to use 3.14 for pi, so that's what I'm going to substitute in there. They tell me that the radius of the base, remember the base is the circle, is 1.5. So I'm going to do times 1.5 squared. And it says the barrel is 5 feet long. So if I were to take that barrel and stand it up, that would be considered my height. Okay, so just because it says 5 feet long, that's still the same as your height. And then we'll take all of that and we'll divide it by 2. All right, so in your calculator, we're going to do 3.14 times 1.5 squared times 5. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to hit divide by 2. And we are not rounding, so we need to write the entire number out, which isn't too horribly long. And so 17.6625 feet cubed is the volume of the trough. All right, guys, great job today.